Well, hello, beautiful people, and welcome back to this, our 12th episode in this journey that we have titled The Journey. And as a reminder, we're going over the 5 core books of Ellen White, and we are on the first one, which is titled Patriarchs and Prophets. We today are on chapter 12, which is titled Abraham in Canaan. In the previous chapter, chapter 11, the title was The Call of Abraham, and we study about how God called Abraham out of his land, out of his people, so that he could start a lineage, a group of people that were worshipers of God. The people that surrounded Abraham in his land were filled with sin and bad practices and sinful practices. So God wanted to start fresh, a people that only knew God as their living God and as their guide. So Abraham was called out. He went out in faith. And now we are in the chapter 12, which is titled Abraham in Canaan. I have my Bible open here. The Bible is to be studied above these books. These books are just, an inside information to the Bible. So in this case, this chapter 12, it's Genesis chapter 13 to 15 or so. So in this case, we're going to be studying them together. And one final thing, the purpose of this series is not to completely discuss everything in the chapter, but to create a curiosity in you so you go and read it yourself. So chapter 12, again, Abraham in Canaan. And this chapter picks up with that Abraham, he was blessed. He was rich in the terms of those times. He had plenty of cattle and food and people that surrounded him. So he also was with a family of him, which was Lot. And Lot also was relatively wealthy and had a lot of cattle and whatnot. So there was conflict. There was conflict between Lot and Abraham, which, were family. So because of the troubles that came with living together, Abraham proposes to Lot to, let's split up. You choose where you want to go and I will go my way. And this is lesson number 1 as the chapter unfolds. We Christians sometimes, we want to claim our ground. In this particular case, Abraham was the senior person. He should have had the priority over Lot into choosing where will he want to go. But Lot, being perhaps younger and ignorant, he took Abraham's word. He was like, okay, you want me to choose first? I will choose first. When in reality, he should have said, no, you know what, Abraham, you're older than me, you're my family, you choose. He actually went and chose. And the lesson for us here, as Christians, we are called to be humble and to avoid conflict at all costs. We're not here to be at odds with people, but to be with people, love people, as Jesus said, right? So Lot, of course, he looked around at the land, and then he saw the plains and the beauty of the rivers, and there were the cities there, and that's where the people, of course, where there's good nature resources, natural resources, the cities will be, built around. So of course the cities were also in the plain, and Lot saw that was beautiful and perfect for him. So he basically took the best of the land for himself. Note that all of this is in Canaan, and all of this is the land that God had promised Abraham that he was going to give to him. And even so, Abraham, knowing this, that all that land eventually will be his and of his descendants, he still let Lot choose. So Abraham went his way, Lot went his way, Lot went to the city. Abraham stayed, let's say, in the countryside. And here, here is where Abraham could connect better with God. I think you can relate when I say that living in the cities is perhaps not the best place to connect with God. Usually in the cities where there's the most sinful practices, there's the most, stress, and the pace of life in the cities is just different than the pace of life than living, say, in the countryside. So it says here, the noble, unselfish spirit of Abraham was displayed, talking about when he let Lot choose where he wants to go. So it moves on, and of course, it keeps talking about Lot's decision to go to the cities, and of course, the consequences that he could not foresee at the moment that would eventually happen. If you've read the Bible, you know the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, which we'll go in a few chapters. But Abraham was, peaceful in the mountains, and he connected with God. But then something happened in the cities where Lot had gone to. I guess this was the first conflict of many to come for him having chosen living in the plains, in the best of the land. So being in the best of the land and being in cities, those were turbulent times, and a war set off. It says, and I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce his name very well, Kedorlaomer, king of Elam, had invaded Canaan 14 years before and made it tributary to him. Several of the princes now revolted, and the Elamite king with 4 allies again marched into the country to reduce them to submission. And of course, they were victorious, and they plundered the cities, including the cities where Lot was living in, and Lot and his family and his people were taken captive. So at this time, Abraham, it says here, seeking first of all divine counsel, Abraham prepared for war. So Abraham wanted to rescue his family, Lot, and his people. But another lesson for us, before he did anything about it, he consulted with God. He asked God for guidance and for direction, and God answered. And he went to war. He partnered up with the kings that were defeated, and off he went to rescue his family. And if you want to read this in the Bible, this is around chapter 14. Chapter 14. So, of course, Abraham, under the guidance of God, was victorious. And it says, the worshiper of Jehovah had not only rendered a great service to the country, but had proved himself a man of valor. I mean, it's not easy to go to war, even less voluntarily, just to, save your family, considering that, that you're going into war with somebody, you could die. It was seen as that righteousness is not cowardice, and that Abraham's religion made him courageous in maintaining the right and defending the oppressed. His heroic act gave him a widespread influence among the surrounding tribes. So Abraham, of course, gained the respect of the kings. He helped take back everything that the enemy had taken away. He, of course, got his family back. And at this point, another lesson for us in Abraham's, life filled with lessons. The kings, because they were so grateful that Abraham helped them, the kings did offer Abraham and said, hey, just give us the people, and you can keep all the wealth and the money, and whatever it is that we gain back, you can keep it. And to many of us in the real world, we would be extremely tempted to, take the riches and be rich and maybe live a little better. But that was not the case for Abraham. Abraham had been promised by God that he was going to be a great nation, that, through his descendants, he will be a great nation, and that the land of Canaan was going to be of his descendants. And he trusted that it was God who was going to make him, quote unquote, wealthy, not the people of this world. So Abraham declined the offer. It says, he will give them no occasion to think that he had engaged in warfare for the sake of gain, or attribute his prosperity to the gift of favor. God had promised to bless Abraham, and to him the glory should be ascribed. Beautiful, huh? Definitely quite the man to have met at those times. So Abraham refused. But here's what happened. He had just gone to war with some of the kings of those times. So his mind became flooded with concern. He was like, okay, now I attacked. Now, everybody know I was me. And by this point, important to note, he had not had his firstborn child. Abraham was childless at this point. So he grew a little bit concerned. He had doubt and he has fear because he basically feared that he was going to get, that some of the kings were going to get revenge on him and they were going to, eliminate him. And there goes the promise that God had made. So something for us to think about. Abraham, even with all his, valor and strength and trust and faith in God, he doubted. He had fear. And it's, almost something peaceful for us to read, right? Because we become doubtful many, many times in our life about God's promises. And that's not something that we are, a keen of. That's not something that we don't experience or won't experience in our Christian life. To have doubt and to have fear is to be human. And Abraham here, of course, showed that human side. And he, for a second there, he, questioned without having kids if he would even be the nation that God had promised he would be. So in vision of the night, the divine voice was again heard. This is God speaking to Abraham. Do not be afraid, Abraham, were the words of the Prince of Princes. I am your shield, your exceedingly great reward. So Abraham was promised one more time. God said one more time, I will make out of you a great nation. And because he has said that, Abraham believed God, okay, and it was accounted to him for righteousness. And that is a verse that we find in Romans 4:3. So still, Abraham being human, probably like many of us or any of us would do, he asked God for a sign. He was, okay, God, I trust you, but you gotta level with me here. What's going on? How do I know you're gonna keep your promise? In those times, it was tradition that when two men will come to an agreement or will make a pact with each other, they would basically kill some animals and split them in half and put them, on the road. And then the person that was promising something to the other person will walk right through the middle of it, basically kind of a symbol of, if I'm not coming through on my word, that I die just like these animals have died here. So being that a tradition that Abraham was, accustomed to, God said, you know what, Abraham, I'm gonna do this for you. And this is where it gets beautiful. Abraham gets the animals, he splits them in half, and I'm going to read now from the Bible because it's just so amazing. And I'm in Genesis chapter 15, verse 17. And it came to pass, and this is after the animals were, split in two, already laid on the road. And it came to pass when the sun went down and it was dark, that behold, there appeared a smoking oven and a burning torch. God is a consuming fire, that is in the Bible, that passed between those pieces. On the same day, the Lord made a covenant to Abraham, saying, to your descendants I have given this land, from the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates. The Canaanites, the Kenizzites, Kadmonites, Hittites, Perizzites, Rephaim, Amorites, all of the ites, God was going to deliver to his descendants. So take this in for a second. God walked through the middle. So God was so, he leveled so much with Abraham that is, I don't know, sometimes it doesn't fit my mind. Instead of Abraham being the one promising God stuff and walking through, God himself walked through the middle and said, you know what, I will keep my promise to you, and this is how serious I am. And it's a great lesson for us, a lesson of love, of how much God loves us and is willing to come to our level to level with us, but also a lesson of God is serious when he makes a promise. He's not joking. And he had told Abraham that he was going to give him descendants that couldn't be counted, just as the stars in the sky couldn't be counted. And he meant it. And he was willing to go and walked through the middle in a pact with Abraham to make him assured that he was serious about it. Behold, says God, my covenant is with you, and you shall be a father of many nations. And then, though God is strict to mark iniquity and to punish transgression, he takes no delight in vengeance. This is it. Basically, the story, I keep hitting the page. Basically, the story flips here, and it goes to the next sign, and this is when Abraham sees the three strangers. Abraham sees, and again, this is another scene, so completely separate from the other, and that's in the Bible. Abraham saw. By the way, I keep saying Abram and Abraham. Please note that it was God who changed Abram's name to Abraham. And that's also in the Bible. So when I say Abram or Abraham, use them interchangeably for the context of what we're explaining. But note that God, after he had made a promise to Abram, changed his name to Abraham. So Abraham saw three strangers walking afar off. And in this case, the three strangers were two angels and God and Jesus himself. And again, that's all in the story, and it's all explained here. We're going to go through it super quick. And as you can see, this is a long chapter. It's a very beautiful and complex chapter. So God had seen how much evilness was happening in the cities, in Sodom and Gomorrah. So he had come to look at the cities, even though he knows everything. It's important to say that it says here, shall I hide from Abraham what I'm doing, said the Lord. So basically, God comes down to simply explain to Abraham what's going on. Abraham sees the three strangers, he invites them in, he talks to them, and then he realizes who he is talking to. And the three strangers, angels and Jesus, they say to Abraham, there's a lot of iniquity in the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, and we have come to evaluate how much evilness there is, because if he has, I guess, blown the meter, we're going to destroy the cities. Now, these were the cities where Lot had chose to live in. So second bad thing for Lot having chosen the city life. Of course, Abraham knows that Lot lives there, so he's like, wait, hold the brakes here. Why are we destroying the cities? And of course, he explains that the evilness happens, and then Abraham starts having a dialogue with God. It's like, so let me get this straight. If you're going to destroy the cities, but what if there's 50 people there that are, faithful to you? Will you destroy the city still? And of course, God never, ever punishes his people. He protects his people. We see this all over the Bible. And the stranger says to Abraham, no, if there's 50, I won't destroy the city. And then Abraham keeps negotiating. What if they're 40? And what if they're, 30 and 20 and eventually 10? What if there's only 10? And it's like, no, for the sake of the 10, I will not destroy the city. So Abraham was given the reassurance that God will not punish the faithful with the unfaithful. And again, another lesson for us as we enter what seems to be the last chapters of the history of this world. Things will get ugly. We are seeing them get ugly around us, but God always protects his people. So Abraham was not only, in his conversation, he wasn't only worried for Lot, his cousin, he was worried for just people in general. It says, love for perishing souls inspired Abraham's prayer. While he loathed the sins of that corrupt city, he desired that the sinners might be saved. And this is the kind of love that Jesus asks us to have toward people. And then I'm going to skip going through the last 4 or 5 pages of this chapter. The last 4 or 5 pages talks a lot about parenting and how Abraham was faithful to God, and hence the people that lived around him witnessed that. The kingdoms that lived around him, when he fought with these kings, saw that, and they noticed that there was something different. They noticed that Abraham was serving the true God. And note how important this is, because this is exactly what God wanted to happen with the people of Israel. Abraham was in a small scale, a one-man show basically. He illuminated those around him. And everybody noticed, all those surrounding people, that they were different. And you know what was the trick here? That he did not mingle with the sons of men, as they described it earlier in Genesis, with the heathen, with the unfaithful. Abraham stayed away. He lived in the countryside, stayed away from the influences of the surrounding nations and their bad practices. So he was a light that illuminated for the rest of them the Spirit of God. And that was God's plan with Israel. As they multiplied, God's plan was, as Abraham's descendants multiply and multiply, I will have such a great people, a great, city filled with people that honor me, that everybody that's around them will look at them and say, okay, they're different, I want to join them. But of course, we humans being the way we are, that's not quite how it happened. And, we'll get to that eventually. But it is important to state here that this whole parenting pages talks a lot about how Abraham chose to stay faithful, displayed that faithfulness, and of course, talked about that faithfulness with those that surround them. And I'm just going to read one quick quote here. Let obedience to parental authority be taught and enforced as the first steps in obedience to the authority of God. Not until parents themselves walk in the law of the Lord with perfect hearts will they be prepared to command their children after them. Which, again, the book connects the dot with what's going on today in the world. And we definitely see the parenting skills in complete decay. And the reason is because there's not a strong foundation at home. So it's like ignorant parents raising future ignorant parents. And the ignorance just exponentially multiplies with every passing generation. This is an amazing chapter. I highly encourage you to read it. Again, chapter 12, Abraham in Canaan, the book Patriarchs and Prophets. And if there's a lesson for us here, once again, trust God's promises. He always comes through in his promises. Just earlier today, or 2 days ago, I was thinking about sometimes living the Christian life is hard. The temptations in this world are heavy temptations. It's hard to stay faithful. And when I think of this and I, feel like I'm gonna go to hell anyway or something like that, that it's just so hard to stay connected with God. I remember the last scenes of the life of Jesus. Jesus was so at Mount Gethsemane, and afterwards he was charged. The sins of the whole world were cast onto him. And he felt for the first time probably ever separated from his Father, from his Heavenly Father, so badly that he had to pray 3 times for the same thing. If it's possible, pass from me this cup. If it's possible, and he didn't get the response. The only reason you ask something 3 times is if you're not getting the response. So he was distant from his Father. It says that he could not see beyond the portals of death, meaning Jesus could not. He didn't know if what he was going through was going to be even accepted by the Father. But God always keeps his promises. Jesus still decided to go through with it and to die on the cross for you and me without even knowing if the sacrifice was going to be accepted, because he knew that was the right thing to do. He didn't feel it, but he did it anyway. And of course, his sacrifice was accepted. Thanks to him, you and me today have access to him. So why am I saying this? Because you will be tempted many, many times to perhaps not do the right thing. And that's okay. Everybody gets tempted. Jesus himself got tempted. But when you're tempted with this, choose to do right. Choose to do the right thing. Choose to honor God, regardless of the circumstance, because the feelings are kind of betrayful. You may not feel it, but the fact that you don't feel it doesn't mean that that makes it true, okay? So when you feel like, diverging from the right path, no, stay true to it. You may not feel it at the moment, but God knows what you're going through, and He will reward you because He has promised if you do the right thing. Anyway, thanks for joining, and until next one.